The stage was brighter than anything the Filipino teenager had ever seen before. The golden spotlights circled across the theater, bouncing against the walls and finally landing on him as he stepped forward. His sneakers squeaked faintly on the polished floor, and his hands clutched the microphone so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. Backstage, he had whispered to himself, "You can do this," but now, standing in front of thousands of people and the 4 judges, his heart pounded so hard it felt like the entire audience could hear it. Terry Crews gave him an encouraging nod from the sidelines, and the teenager drew in a shaky breath. Simon Cowell leaned forward, elbows on the desk, studying him with that familiar mix of curiosity and sharpness. "Tell us who you are," Simon said in his calm but commanding tone. "My name is Miguel," the teen replied softly, his Filipino accent wrapping around every syllable. "I'm 16 years old, and this is my first time singing on a big stage like this." A small nervous laugh escaped him, earning a gentle chuckle from the audience. "How do you feel right now?" Heidi asked kindly. Miguel swallowed. "Honestly, I'm scared. I grew up singing in the streets back home, and music, it's always been my way to forget pain. Tonight, I want to share a song that means everything to me. It's for my family and for anyone who has ever felt like giving up." The crowd immediately quieted, sensing the weight behind his words. Even Simon's sharp gaze softened. In that moment, Miguel wasn't just a contestant, he was a boy carrying his entire world onto the stage. He took one more breath, eyes briefly closing, and prepared to sing. The atmosphere shifted from chatter to stillness, the kind of silence that says, "This moment could be unforgettable." The first note floated into the air like a fragile ribbon of sound. Miguel's voice, delicate yet steady, carried the purity of raw emotion. It wasn't polished like a professional recording, it was real, unfiltered, and trembling with truth. Within seconds, the audience leaned forward, captivated by the honesty in his tone. His song spoke of struggle, of nights spent wondering if tomorrow would bring hope, of dreams held together with faith. As the melody grew, his voice blossomed. There were moments of softness where his whisper-like singing painted sorrow across the hall, and moments of power where he lifted his head high and let the pain burst into beauty. The lyrics weren't just words, they were pieces of his heart stitched together in music. A woman in the audience dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Another man clasped his hands to his chest, swaying with the rhythm. By the second verse, the camera caught Howie Mandel closing his eyes, visibly touched. Sofia Vergara leaned back in awe, whispering to Heidi, "He's amazing." But the most striking reaction came from Simon. Known for his sharp critiques and stone-like expressions, he was unexpectedly vulnerable. His lips pressed together, and his eyes glistened as though he was holding back tears. The song's crescendo hit, Miguel's voice soaring higher than anyone expected, and Simon blinked quickly, one tear escaping down his cheek. The moment shocked the audience. Simon Cowell, the man who rarely showed emotion, was crying. Miguel's voice cracked slightly toward the end, not from weakness but from sheer feeling. He clutched the microphone like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. As the final note lingered, the entire auditorium erupted into silence, not applause yet, but stunned, reverent silence. Then, like a wave crashing, the audience exploded into cheers and rose to their feet. The applause thundered, people shouted his name, and the energy shook the room. Miguel, tears streaming down his face, bowed his head in disbelief. The roar of the crowd seemed endless, a standing ovation that stretched on and on. Miguel stood frozen in the golden spotlight, tears rolling freely down his cheeks as confetti from earlier acts crunched softly beneath his shoes. He couldn't believe it. These thousands of strangers were clapping for him, cheering for him, chanting his name. Finally, the applause settled enough for the judges to speak. Heidi was first, her voice warm. "Miguel, you are a gift. That was not just singing, that was storytelling, and you made us all feel every single word." The audience cheered again. Sophia leaned forward, eyes sparkling. "I think you have something very, very special. The world needs to hear your voice." Howie nodded seriously. "There are singers, and then there are artists. Tonight, you proved you're an artist. You didn't just perform, you connected." Then all eyes turned to Simon. He sat silently for a moment, hands clasped, his expression unreadable. The theater hushed in anticipation. Simon's voice was low, almost shaky when he finally spoke. "Miguel, I've been doing this a very long time. I've heard thousands of voices, but it's rare, very rare, that someone comes on this stage and sings in a way that breaks through all the noise, all the barriers, and just hits your heart. And you did that tonight." His voice cracked slightly, and the camera zoomed in just as Simon wiped another tear from his cheek. The audience gasped. Miguel's lips trembled, overwhelmed by the acknowledgement. Simon leaned forward, his expression suddenly firm. "You know what, Miguel? I don't think you need to wait any longer for the world to recognize you." And with that, Simon slammed the golden buzzer. A shower of golden confetti burst into the air, shimmering under the stage lights as the audience screamed. Miguel fell to his knees, covering his face with his hands. The other judges stood, clapping wildly, and Terry Crews rushed onto the stage, lifting Miguel into a hug as the teen sobbed into his shoulder. Simon, still visibly emotional, stood up and clapped, his eyes never leaving the boy on stage. It was a moment of pure magic, a once-in-a-lifetime performance that turned a shy Filipino teenager into a star, and made even Simon Cowell cry. The audience knew they had witnessed history. For Miguel, the dream that started in the streets of the Philippines had finally taken flight, soaring higher than he had ever imagined.